The Gospel, the Epistle, and the reading from Isaiah share many commonalities. When meeting the divine, whether for Isaiah in this experience of the heavenly court, Paul through his transformation on the road to Damascus, or Simon in the boat, the correct attitude is one of humility. No matter who we are and what we have done in life, none of us is perfect. We have all sinned. We have all done or said things or chosen not to do or say things that have hurt others and our relationship with God. It is simply part of being human. We do not need to practice self-flagellation or wear hair shirts to punish ourselves for these hurts. But if it is harm done to others, we are called to do what we can to repair that harm. Despite being sinners, Isaiah, Paul, and Simon were nonetheless called by God to be God's messengers in the world. Each was called to bring a message from God to the people. Now, Simon and Paul were asked to deliver the good news. But as we hear in today's reading, Isaiah was tasked with preaching a message of woe. Isaiah lived in the southern kingdom before and during the Assyrian conquest of the north. And his message was that unless the southern kingdom of Judah reformed, unless they started taking care of refugees and treating them like citizens, unless they made sure that the most vulnerable, the widows, the orphans, and those with disabilities were provided for, unless those with wealth and power saw the poor and disenfranchised as their responsibility, and unless the king subjugated himself to God, God's priests, the Assyrians would conquer Judah. He preached this message to three kings, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Jotham listened, and the temple was rebuilt. The central administration ensured that the borders were protected from hostile armies and that refugees and the vulnerable already living in Judah were properly cared for. The next king, Ahaz, did not heed Isaiah. He enjoyed being surrounded by glamour and riches. He went to the courts of pagan kings and brought their idols back to Jerusalem. He abused the poor and the refugees, and he built up his own treasury with gold, jewelry, spices, and exotic woods. Under his reign, Judah became a vassal state of the Assyrians, basically allowing the nation to be conquered without a single arrow flying or sword slashing. And to ensure both his own wealth and the wealth and satisfaction of their new overlords, those already with little were taxed into poverty and near starvation. During Ahaz's reign, Isaiah and the other prophets got louder and more vociferous about the evil that this agreement had brought into the land. Not just Assyrian idols, but Assyrian values of survival of the fittest. When Ahaz's son Hezekiah came to the throne, he listened to Isaiah. He withdrew from the vassal agreements with the Assyrians and banished foreign temples, priests, and idols from Jerusalem. What he did was not politically prudent. He brought the wrath of the Assyrians down upon Judah. It was in direct opposition to human wisdom. It was in conformance with God's wisdom. During the time of Hezekiah, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, whose kings and ruling class had been given very similar warnings by their prophets that Isaiah had given the southern kings. But the wealthy of the north continued to abuse the poor until the Assyrian army came to loot and murder. Some of those prophets were among the refugees who fled to the southern kingdom when the north was burned. And it is because of their testimonies in the Bible that we know what happened there. But then the Assyrian army swept south through Judah and to Jerusalem. The greatest army in the world surrounded the gates of this tiny city with the king trapped inside. Jerusalem should have been defeated and razed to the ground. Even the king put on burial clothes in despair over the impending destruction and massacre. But then something happened. A miracle. According to the Bible, the angel of death was sent upon the conquering army, and over a single night, a third of the army died. The rest, including the horses, were left barely able to stand, much less conquer anything, and the signal was given to retreat. Now, as a person of faith and a wastewater engineer, I need to point out both that these events were substantiated by the Assyrians, and the likely cause of death was not an angel. Rather, tainted water likely decimated this army. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, or some similar waterborne pathogen, especially in a dry, hot climate, can cause severe dehydration and death very quickly. So there was some human ingenuity in Hezekiah's preparations for the siege, in ensuring a safe water supply for the occupants of the city. But it was only through faith that he chose to defy the greatest power on earth to safeguard the freedom of his people and the covenant of God. Now, we have veered quite a ways down a rabbit hole from where we started with the calling stories of Simon, Paul, and Isaiah. But the entirety of the story of Isaiah shows what they were being called to. Being a servant of God is not safe. It is not about accumulating wealth. It does not mean being well-liked by others. It is a defiance against the wisdom of this world. It is dangerous. Both Paul and Simon Peter were martyred. It is about seeing the hurts of others as your own and caring for those around you as your family. It is about having hope, even when all seems lost. If we stand against the evils of this world, we may be saved, as the people of Jerusalem were, or we may perish, like Paul and Simon Peter. But it does not truly matter. Even death is not the end. Nothing in this world has power over us when we live into God's kingdom. Amen.